the Outer Hebrides, there is an understanding. It's never spoken of, but somehow we all know the rules. When the sun goes down, you don't investigate the whispers you think you heard on the other side of the hill. You don't go to the standing stones or to certain glens, and you never, ever follow the dim lights on the moor. When the sun goes down, all of these places belong to them. I grew up in Cremore, a village on the Isle of Lewis with a population of about 30. The house I grew up on was on a croft. My gran had sheep. The next closest house was not close, but that didn't mean we didn't have a neighbour. Long before I was born, a caravan rolled up to my gran's croft. In it was a man from Texas. In Lewis, it's essential to have a nickname. That's because everyone has the same name, and I'm only being a little hyperbolic there. Because this man was from Texas, he was called Texas. I didn't say people had to have good nicknames, but he was everything you'd hope for from a man called Texas. Thick accent, handlebar moustache, Stetson hat. He really leaned into the stereotype hard. Texas told my gran he was a lobster fisher and asked if he could park his caravan on her croft, far enough away from the house so that she'd still have her privacy, of course. He explained that the cove at the bottom of her land was the best place on the island to catch lobster. My gran agreed, but on the condition that Texas pay for the privilege in lobster. It was because of this strange arrangement that I grew up thinking a perfectly normal thing to say about dinner was, "Ugh, not lobster again." Texas's caravan never left. Texas was a nice man, very patient with me and my siblings. At some point, my parents realised that we were pestering him a little too constantly though, and they set up a system. There was a little room at the end of the caravan. If he was home, he'd put on the light in that room and we'd be able to see it from our kitchen window. If he wasn't home, or if he wanted some peace and quiet from bored children who were fascinated by his hat and accent, then the light stayed off. My parents are retired now, but they used to be teachers in Glasgow. I remember every month or so my mum would get a call from my gran late at night. She'd say, "There's a light on in the caravan." The thing is, my gran was becoming a little confused. She was an incredible woman, but age was finally starting to catch up on her. My mum would explain to her that there couldn't be a light. Texas had been dead for years. The caravan, left where it had stood for so long, had rusted and been torn gradually in half by the unforgiving island weather. There wasn't any electricity in the caravan. There was barely any caravan at all. My gran dying was one of the most devastating things that ever happened to me. I was old enough to stay at home in Lewis when my parents had to go back to work in Glasgow, so I did for a while. To feel close to her for a bit longer. For anyone who hasn't been on a Scottish island, it gets dark. There aren't street lights, there aren't nearby houses, there isn't even the reflected light pollution of cities because there are no cities. You're totally reliant on the stars and the moon. And for anyone unfamiliar with Scotland in general, we have a lot of big dark clouds here. The design of our kitchen is a bit frustrating. There's a light switch by the front door, but none by the door that leads further into the house. On that dark night, I walked into the kitchen, knowing I'd have to navigate my way back in the darkness, and I turned off the overhead light. I happened to look out of the window. There was a light on in the caravan. No, a reflection. The moon reflected in the remaining glass. No, there was no moon. There was no glass. There was a light on in the caravan. No, a light from the pier at the bottom of the village was illuminating the ruined interior. That's what I was seeing. No, there was no light on the pier. There was nothing else but darkness and light on in the caravan. There's a rule in the Outer Hebrides: never follow the lights on the moors. I've never been any good at following rules. I put on a coat, I grabbed a torch. If anything, the torch felt like a weakness, its pathetic glow only revealing a small way in front of me whilst also wrecking my night vision. I walked cautiously to the ruined caravan, careful not to trip on the familiar yet always treacherous moor, envisioning the story in the Stornoway Gazette, telling how I broke my ankle and froze to death so close to my home. The caravan was a shell. Rust and decay reigned. It lay in two halves like the Titanic. I shone my torch inside. Moss-covered chairs, a rusted cooker with plants growing in the open oven, a life reclaimed by nature, but no light, nothing that could explain what I had seen. Not that I could see from the outside, anyway. I steeled myself. I took a breath. I stepped inside, and I heard the noise almost immediately. Something moving. Something big. I tried to retreat, I wasn't fast enough. I saw the dark shape charge towards me. I felt it hit my hip and knock me aside, knocking my useless torch to the floor. I scrabbled around on the ground trying to reach it before whatever the thing was finished me off. I spun around, still on the floor. I saw my attacker, standing just outside the caravan now, staring at me. A sheep. Just a sheep. It had panicked when I trapped it, that's all. I went home. I locked the door. I slept. In our house, there is an understanding. It's never spoken of, but somehow we all know the rules. When you turn off the kitchen light, you don't look out the window. You don't look for that cold light in the darkness.